The English countryside, a tapestry woven with emerald fields and sapphire streams, whispered tales of simpler times. Sunlight dripped like honey, painting the landscape in hues of gold and green. Amidst this idyllic setting nestled a quaint village, its heart beating in rhythm with the seasons. Here life revolved around the land, its people bound by tradition and toil. Thomas, a young farm laborer with calloused hands and a heart of gold, was a familiar sight in these parts. His days were spent amidst the rolling fields, his strong back bent to the rhythm of the harvest. The earth yielded her bounty to his touch, a testament to his unwavering dedication and quiet strength. Emily, still wet behind the ears, saw Thomas as a kind, older brother, a source of comfort and familiarity in her world of youthful exploration. She admired his strength, his quiet resilience in the face of hardship, yet her affections were that of a sibling, innocent and pure. The thought of romance never crossed her mind. She was too busy chasing butterflies and weaving dreams from sunbeams. Their paths crossed often, in the bustling marketplace at the village well, or during the annual harvest festival. Thomas, tongue-tied in her presence, would steal shy glances, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He longed to express the depths of his feelings, to weave words into poetry that would capture her heart. But the weight of his own perceived inadequacy held him back. What did he, a simple farm laborer, have to offer someone as bright and full of life as Emily? The gap in their ages, the stark contrast in their social standings loomed large in his mind, casting a shadow over his unspoken desires. He carried his love for her silently, a precious secret tucked away in the deepest recesses of his heart. He watched her blossom year after year, like a wildflower dancing in the summer breeze, knowing that she was destined for a life far beyond the confines of their small village. Emily, oblivious to the turmoil in Thomas's heart, treated him with the easy familiarity of a childhood friend. She would chatter endlessly about her dreams, her aspirations of seeing the world beyond the rolling hills that cradled their village. Thomas, a captive audience of one, would listen patiently, his heart aching with a love he couldn't express. He cherished their shared moments, the brief encounters that punctuated his otherwise monotonous days, the way her eyes would light up when he shared a silly joke, the gentle touch of her hand as she passed him a cup of freshly drawn water from the well. These small gestures became sacred relics, fueling the embers of hope that flickered within his soul. As the seasons turned and Emily blossomed from a carefree girl into a young woman, Thomas realized the futility of his silent yearnings. He knew he could never offer her the life she deserved, the life she so clearly craved. And so, with a heavy heart and a love that remained unspoken, he made the agonizing decision to leave the village, to seek his fortune elsewhere. News of Thomas's impending departure spread through the village like wildfire in a dry field. The villagers, accustomed to the rhythm of his presence, were taken aback. Emily, though her heart held no romantic feelings for him, felt a pang of sadness at the thought of his absence. He was, after all, a constant fixture in her life, a source of quiet strength and unwavering support. The eve before his departure, Thomas found himself drawn to the farmer's cottage, an invisible force pulling him towards the source of his unspoken longing. He stood in the shadows, his heart pounding against his ribs as he watched Emily through the window. She was humming a cheerful tune, her slender fingers deftly mending a piece of lace. The sight of her so serene and unaware of his torment ignited a flicker of hope within his soul. He wanted to rush in, to declare the depths of his love, to beg her to wait for him, but the weight of his own insecurities, the knowledge that he could never offer her the life she deserved, held him back. He turned away, his heart heavy with unspoken words and unfulfilled desires. The image of Emily's radiant smile seared into his memory. He walked through the moonlit fields, the scent of wildflowers heavy in the air, his footsteps echoing the silent lament of his soul. He found himself at their favorite spot, a secluded clearing amidst a grove of ancient oak trees. It was here, beneath the watchful gaze of the stars, that they had spent countless hours sharing stories and dreams. The memory of her laughter, as light and carefree as the summer breeze, seemed to linger in the air, a bittersweet reminder of all that he was leaving behind. As the first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold, Thomas made a silent vow. He would prove himself worthy of her love, would make something of his life, even if it meant leaving everything he held dear behind. With a heavy heart but a newfound determination, he left the village at sunrise, the memory of Emily's radiant smile, a beacon of hope guiding him towards an uncertain future. Little did he know that fate, in its own cruel and unpredictable way, had other plans. Plans that would test the limits of his love and push him to the very brink of human endurance. The early morning mist clung to Thomas as he walked away from the village, his meager belongings packed in a worn knapsack. Each step away from Emily's memory was a painful wrench, yet a strange sense of purpose filled him. He carried a flicker of hope in his heart, a belief that he could create a better future for himself. He traveled light, his footsteps echoing the steady rhythm of his thoughts. Days bled into nights, the monotony broken only by the changing scenery and chance encounters with fellow travelers. As weeks turned into months, a new undercurrent began to stir in the air, a sense of unease that rippled through the towns and villages he passed. Newspapers, plastered on walls and hawked on street corners, proclaimed in bold headlines the escalating tensions on the continent. Talk of war, once a distant rumble, grew louder, casting a long shadow over even the most idyllic corners of the English countryside. At first, the war seemed like a distant storm, something that raged far beyond the borders of his small world. He had heard tales of past conflicts, stories passed down through generations, but they seemed like legends from a bygone era, irrelevant to his own life and aspirations. But as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, the war drew closer, its icy grip tightening around the hearts and minds of the people he encountered. Young men, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and bravado, bid farewell to their loved ones, their laughter tinged with a newfound solemnity. Thomas, caught between his own personal journey and the gathering storm clouds of war, felt a growing sense of unease. He had left his village to build a future for himself, to prove himself worthy of Emily's love. But how could he focus on personal aspirations when the world around him seemed on the brink of collapse? The declaration of war shattered the illusion of peace, plunging the nation into a frenzy of patriotic fervor. Recruitment posters featuring bold slogans and stirring images of valiant soldiers appeared overnight, transforming once familiar streets into stark reminders of the conflict that now consumed the world. Thomas, caught in the maelstrom, felt the pull of duty tugging at his conscience. He had never considered himself a fighting man, his nature inclined towards the quiet rhythms of the land. Yet the thought of standing idly by while others fought for their country, for the very future he envisioned with Emily, filled him with a profound sense of unease. He wrestled with his conscience, torn between his love for Emily, his aspirations for a shared future, and the growing conviction that he could no longer remain on the sidelines of history. He thought of the young men he had encountered on his journey, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and resolve as they marched off to war. One evening, under a sky ablaze with stars, Thomas made his decision. He would enlist. It was a decision born not out of blind patriotism or a thirst for glory, but from a deep-seated sense of duty, a belief that he had a responsibility to protect the land, the values, and the very future he held dear. The journey from farm laborer to soldier was swift and disorienting. Gone were the familiar rhythms of the countryside. In their place stood the harsh realities of military life. He adapted quickly, his natural strength serving him well. He learned to march in formation and navigate trenches. The camaraderie of his fellow soldiers provided a much-needed anchor. Yet Emily's memory remained a constant presence. He wrote to her whenever he could, each word a testament to love. As the weeks turned into months, Thomas felt himself changing. The war was burning away his innocence, forging him into a soldier. Nothing could have prepared Thomas for the stark reality of the trenches. The air, thick with the stench of death and decay, hung heavy over the labyrinthine network of ditches. The constant rumble of artillery fire, punctuated by the staccato bursts of machine guns, formed a terrifying symphony of war, a constant reminder of the fragility of life in this subterranean world. Days blurred into nights, each indistinguishable from the last, marked only by the relentless cycle of fear and boredom. Sleep, when it came, was a fleeting respite, haunted by nightmares of exploding shells and the anguished cries of fallen comrades. He witnessed firsthand the horrors of war, the senseless loss of life, the casual brutality that stripped men of their humanity, the ever-present threat of death lurking around every corner. He saw friends and comrades fall victim to sniper fire, machine gun fire, and the indiscriminate rain of artillery shells. Through it all, he clung to the memory of Emily, her letters arriving like rays of sunshine through the gloom, his only solace in this living hell. Her words, filled with love and unwavering faith in his safe return, fueled his determination to survive, to return to the world beyond the trenches, a world where love, not war, dictated the rhythm of their lives.
Thomas, keep those letters close. They're our lifeline, mate. We have to believe we'll make it back.
The first sign of the gas attack was a strange metallic tang in the air, followed by a hissing sound that sent shivers down Thomas's spine. Panic rippled through the trenches as the order rang out, "Gas! Gas! Masks on!"
Gas, gas, masks on!
Fumbling with trembling hands, Thomas struggled to secure his gas mask, his heart pounding against his ribs. He looked around, his eyes stinging from the acrid fumes, and saw his comrades, their faces contorted in fear, scrambling for their own masks. The world dissolved into a swirling vortex of green and yellow as the poisonous gas enveloped everything. Men coughed and choked, their desperate gasps for air drowned out by the hissing of the canisters and the incessant roar of the artillery fire. Thomas, his vision blurring, stumbled through the chaos, his lungs burning with each agonizing breath. He could feel the life draining out of him, his body succumbing to the insidious poison that filled the air. He collapsed to the ground, his last conscious thought a silent prayer for Emily, her name escaping his lips in a desperate whisper.
Emily.
Through the fog of war and the lingering effects of the gas, a flicker of consciousness returned to Thomas. He was vaguely aware of being lifted, of jostling movements, of the muffled voices of men speaking in hushed tones. He opened his eyes, only to close them quickly against the blinding white light. He was vaguely aware of being in a field hospital, the air thick with the smell of antiseptics and suffering. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his dreams a disjointed montage of battle scenes and Emily's smiling face. One face, however, began to appear more frequently, cutting through the fog of his delirium. A familiar face framed by a nurse's cap, her eyes, as blue as he remembered, filled with a mixture of concern and something akin to recognition. Could it be? Was his delirious mind playing tricks on him? Or was fate, in its own cruel and unpredictable way, offering him a glimmer of hope amidst the devastation of war? The field hospital, a sprawling canvas city erected amidst the ruins of a once peaceful landscape, throbbed with the rhythms of pain and resilience. The air, thick with the stench of antiseptics and gangrene, hummed with the constant activity of nurses, doctors, and orderlies battling tirelessly against the relentless tide of casualties. Thomas, his senses slowly returning, found himself adrift in this sea of suffering. Each rasping breath, each shift of his aching body brought a fresh wave of pain, reminding him of the fragility of his own existence. He lay on a cot, one among countless others, his gaze drifting across the faces of his fellow soldiers, their features etched with pain, fear, and a weariness that spoke of battles fought and horrors witnessed.
Yet, amidst the despair, there were glimmers of hope. The nurses, their faces pale with fatigue but their eyes shining with compassion, moved among the wounded like angels of mercy, their gentle touch and soothing words offering a balm to both physical and emotional wounds. They worked tirelessly, these women who had volunteered to leave behind their homes and families, to serve on the front lines of this brutal conflict. They cleaned and bandaged wounds, administered medications, and offered words of comfort and encouragement to men who had witnessed the very worst that humanity could inflict.
Days turned into nights, the boundaries between dreams and reality blurring in Thomas's fevered mind. The faces of his comrades, their features twisted in pain or slack with the stillness of death, swirled in his delirium, their stories merging with his own into a disjointed narrative of war and loss. Through this haze of pain and confusion, one image began to solidify, a beacon of light cutting through the darkness. A pair of blue eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something akin to recognition hovered over him. A gentle hand, cool and reassuring, pressed against his forehead, checking for fever. He tried to focus, to make sense of the image that both comforted and terrified him. Could it be her? Had fate, in its cruel and unpredictable way, brought Emily to this God-forsaken place, to his bedside? He tried to speak, to call out her name, but his voice, ravaged by the gas and weakened by fever, emerged as a raspy whisper, lost in the cacophony of the field hospital.
Easy now, soldier. You're safe here. Just rest.
It was her, older, her youthful innocence tempered by the grim realities of war, but undeniably her. Her eyes, once sparkling with carefree joy, now reflected the weight of the suffering she witnessed daily, yet they still held a glimmer of the girl he had loved, the girl who had haunted his thoughts in the darkest hours of battle.
Her words, spoken with a familiar lilt, sent a jolt of electricity through Thomas. He opened his eyes, forcing himself to focus, and stared into the face that had haunted his dreams both in the trenches and in the years before the war.
Emily,
he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. Recognition dawned on her face, her eyes widening in disbelief.
Thomas, is it really you?
it's me. I can't believe it's you.
Their hands met, his rough and calloused, hers soft but surprisingly strong. In that touch, years of separation melted away, replaced by a flood of emotions too complex, too overwhelming to process in the sterile chaos of the field hospital.
I thought I'd lost you. We received word that your unit, that there had been a gas attack.
He saw the unspoken question in her eyes, the fear she tried so valiantly to conceal.
I'm all right.
He reassured her, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. He was alive, yes, but the war had left its mark on him, both physically and emotionally, in ways he was only beginning to comprehend.
You're safe now. We'll take care of you.
He wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and lose himself in the familiar comfort of her embrace, but the weight of his injuries and the presence of others in the crowded tent held him back.
You've changed,
he whispered, his gaze tracing the lines of her face, the subtle maturity that had replaced her girlish softness.
So have you,
she replied, her eyes searching his, acknowledging the toll that war had taken on them both. He wanted to tell her everything, to pour out the fear and the loneliness, the horrors he had witnessed, and the nightmares that plagued his sleep. But the words wouldn't come, caught between the enormity of his experiences and the limitations of language to convey the true depths of his emotions. The field hospital, for all its chaos and suffering, had become a strange point of convergence for Thomas and Emily. Their paths, once separated by war, had intersected in the most unexpected of places.
In the midst of death and despair, their reunion was a flickering candle in the darkness.
Yet the hospital was not a place for healing hearts. The constant presence of suffering created an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. When Thomas had recovered enough to be moved, it was Emily who secured his transfer to a convalescent convent nestled in the French countryside. Far from the front lines, surrounded by rolling hills and whispering fields, the convent offered a sanctuary of peace and tranquility, a stark contrast to the brutal realities of the trenches.
The journey itself, though undertaken in the back of a bumpy ambulance, marked a transition for Thomas. Each mile further from the front lines lifted a weight from his chest, allowing him to breathe a little easier, to imagine a future beyond the next barrage, the next charge, the next potential encounter with death.
Emily, seated beside him, her presence a constant reassurance, spoke of the convent with a reverence that resonated with Thomas's own yearning for peace.
She described the gardens, lovingly tended by the nuns, where roses bloomed amidst herbs and vegetables, a testament to life enduring even in the shadow of war. She told him of the quiet rhythms of the convent, the gentle tolling of bells marking the hours for prayer and reflection, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the battlefield.
And she spoke of the other soldiers recovering there, men who, like Thomas, carried the physical and emotional scars of war, finding solace and camaraderie in the shared experience of healing and hope.
The convent, with its high ceilings and cool stone floors, offered a welcome respite from the summer heat. Thomas found solace in the simple routines of convalescence.
He joined the other soldiers for meals, their conversations a mix of battlefield anecdotes and shared anxieties.
In the gardens, beneath the shade of ancient chestnut trees, Thomas and Emily reconnected. Surrounded by nature, they could shed the weight of war, if only for a little while.
They spoke of their lives before the conflict, of shared memories of village life.
As the days grew shorter, Thomas and Emily found themselves drawn to each other with a renewed intensity. The war had stripped away the pretense and social barriers that had once separated them. One cool evening, Thomas finally confessed his long-held feelings for Emily.
Emily, I've carried my love for you silently for years.
The distance between them evaporated in the shared intimacy of their confessions. Their love, blossoming amidst the tragedy of war, was a tapestry woven with threads of joy, sorrow, gratitude, and a profound understanding of life's fragility. They spoke of their hopes for the future, their dreams of a world at peace, their shared longing for a life far removed from the battlefields that had brought them together.
I dream of a world at peace, Thomas. A place where we can build a life together, far from all this suffering.
Yet the shadow of war, ever present, tempered their happiness with a poignant awareness of the sacrifices made, the lives lost, the futures forever altered by the conflict raging beyond the convent walls. They visited the convent cemetery, a somber reminder of the war's toll, where rows of white crosses marked the final resting places of soldiers who had succumbed to their wounds or illnesses.
These men, they gave everything. We owe it to them to live our lives fully, to honor their memory.
They stood in silent tribute, their fingers intertwined, offering a silent prayer for the fallen and a heartfelt pledge to honor their memory by embracing life with a renewed sense of purpose and appreciation. As the weeks melted into months and the war in Europe raged on, Thomas and Emily began to speak of a future together. It was a future painted in broad strokes, a shared dream of returning to England, to a life far removed from the battlefields that had brought them together.
I can't wait to show you the farm. We'll walk through the fields, watch the sunset over the hills, and you can finally meet my family.
Emily, her eyes sparkling with anticipation, teased him about his idyllic descriptions.
And what about your dreams of seeing the world, Thomas? Surely a farmhand's life can't be enough after all you've seen and done.
He took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers.
The world can wait, Emily. Right now, all I want is to go home, to build a life with you, a life filled with love and laughter and the simple joys we once took for granted.
The news, when it came, was both expected and unwelcome. Thomas, deemed fit enough to return to England, received his discharge papers with mixed emotions. The joy of leaving the war behind, of returning home a changed man, was tempered by the bittersweet pang of leaving Emily behind.
Promise me you're right, she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. Promise me you won't forget.
He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that spoke volumes.
Never, he vowed, his voice rough with emotion. I could never forget you, Emily. You're a part of me now, woven into the very fabric of my being.
He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that held the weight of their shared experiences, the bittersweet joy of their reunion, the aching longing for a future yet to be realized. It was a kiss that spoke of unspoken promises, of a love that had weathered the storms of war and emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. Emily, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck, returned his kiss with a fervor that surprised even her. In that moment, she poured all her love, her fear, her hope for the future into that single heart-stopping embrace. When they finally broke apart, their faces flushed, their breaths mingling in the cool evening air, a profound silence descended upon them. It was a silence that throbbed with unspoken emotions, with the weight of their goodbyes, with the knowledge that the war, though nearing its end, still held sway over their destinies.
I'll be back, Emily, he vowed, his voice husky with emotion. As soon as this bloody war is over, I'll come back for you. We'll build that life we talked about, the one we dreamed of amidst the trenches and the hospital beds.
The journey back to England was a blur to Thomas, his senses dulled by a strange mix of relief and anticipation. He was leaving behind the horrors of the trenches, the constant threat of death, the camaraderie forged in blood and fire. Yet he was also leaving behind the woman who had reawakened his heart, the woman who had shown him the true meaning of love and sacrifice amidst the ruins of a world at war. He thought of her constantly, her image a beacon of light in the darkness of his memories. He pictured her moving among the patients at the convent, her touch gentle, her words soothing, her spirit unbroken despite the suffering she witnessed daily. He wrote to her whenever he could, pouring out his heart in ink-stained letters that spoke of his longing, his hopes for their future, his unwavering belief that their love, forged in the crucible of war, could withstand any separation. Her letters, arriving at irregular intervals, were a lifeline, a tangible reminder of her presence in his life. She wrote of the convent, of the patients under her care, of her own quiet hopes for a future where war was nothing more than a distant memory. Time, once measured in the relentless rhythm of battle, now stretched out before Thomas, each day an agonizing reminder of Emily's absence. He returned to his village, to the familiar landscapes of his childhood, but everything seemed different, tinged with a bittersweet nostalgia. The war, though physically distant, had cast a long shadow over his homeland. The village, once bustling with life, now bore the scars of conflict. Young men lost in battle, families grieving, a sense of weariness hanging heavy in the air. Amidst the ruins, however, a spirit of resilience endured. The village church, though partially destroyed by bombs, had been hastily repaired, its makeshift altar a symbol of hope amidst the devastation. It was here, in this sacred space, hallowed by loss and imbued with the prayers of generations, that Thomas and Emily had decided to exchange their vows. The news of their impending marriage spread through the village like wildfire, rekindling a spark of joy in the hearts of those who had borne witness to the long shadow of war. It was a testament to the enduring power of love, a beacon of hope amidst the ruins, a promise of new beginnings in a world struggling to heal. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the autumn sun casting a golden glow over the village. Emily, arriving from France just days earlier, looked radiant in a simple white dress, her blue eyes shining with a happiness that transcended the somber backdrop of the bombed-out church.
You look beautiful, Emily, just beautiful.
Thomas, his chest tight with emotion, waited for her at the altar, his military uniform a stark reminder of the conflict that had both separated and united them. As she made her way towards him, her hand resting lightly on her father's arm, he thought of the years he had carried his love for her silently, the unspoken longing that had sustained him through the darkest hours of war.
I do.
Do you, Thomas, take Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife?
Their vows, exchanged beneath the shattered remnants of the church roof, resonated with a depth of meaning that transcended the traditional words. They spoke of love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger, of a bond forged in the face of unimaginable adversity, of a shared commitment to building a future together, a future where peace, not war, would define their lives. The wedding reception, a joyous affair held in a nearby barn hastily decorated with wildflowers and bunting, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Villagers, their faces etched with loss, but their eyes shining with a newfound hope, danced and sang, celebrating the union of two young people who embodied the promise of new beginnings.
This is perfect, Thomas.
Thomas, his arm wrapped tightly around Emily's waist, felt a surge of pure happiness as he whirled her around the makeshift dance floor. The music, the laughter, the warmth of her hand in his, all of it washed over him, chasing away the shadows of war, reminding him of the beauty that still existed in the world. As the evening wore on and the stars twinkled above the ruined church, Thomas and Emily stole away from the festivities, seeking a moment of quietude amidst the joyous chaos. They found themselves drawn to the gardens behind the church, where amidst the overgrown rose bushes and the crumbling statues, a single bench offered a place of respite. They sat in comfortable silence, their fingers intertwined, their love a tangible presence in the cool night air. The war, though officially over, still cast a long shadow over their lives, its echoes lingering in their memories, its scars etched upon their hearts.
We made it, Thomas, we really did.
Yet in that moment, surrounded by the ruins of a world struggling to rebuild, Their love story stood as a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. They had found each other amidst the chaos and carnage of war, their love a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. Their journey, from the idyllic English countryside to the blood-soaked battlefields of France, from the sterile confines of the field hospital to the tranquil sanctuary of the convent, had been one of loss, resilience, and an unyielding belief in the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. As the moon cast long shadows across the gardens and the first whispers of dawn painted the eastern sky with hues of rose and gold, Thomas and Emily rose to their feet, their hands still clasped together, their love a beacon of hope illuminating the path ahead. The war was over, a new day was dawning, and their love story, forged in the crucible of conflict, was just beginning.